The Middle Passage. The journey of the slave ships from Africa to the Americas was called the Middle Passage. For African slaves, it was a journey of despair and danger. Torn from their homes, chained slaves endured overcrowding, brutality, filth and stench, and life-threatening disease. Their response was often depression, revolt, or suicide. Read these eyewitness accounts. Olaudah Equiana, Gustavus Vasa, an Igbo captured as a child. When I looked round the ship and saw a large furnace or copper boiling, and a multitude of black people of every description chained together, every one of their countenances expressing dejection and sorrow, I no longer doubted my fate, and, quite overpowered with horror and anguish, I fell motionless on the deck and fainted. I was soon put down under the decks, and there I received such a salutation in my nostrils as I had never experienced in my life, so that with the loathsomeness of the stench and crying together, I became so sick and low that I was not able to eat, nor had I the least desire to taste anything. I now wished for the last friend, death, to relieve me, but soon, to my grief, two of the white men offered me eatables, and, on my refusing to eat, one of them held me fast by the hands and laid me across, I think, the windlass, and tied my feet, while the other flogged me severely. But still I feared I should be put to death. The white people looked and acted, as I thought, in so savage a manner, for I had never seen among any people such instances of brutal cruelty, and this not only shown toward us blacks, but also some of the whites themselves. The closeness of the place and the heat of the climate, added to the number in the ship, which was so crowded that each had scarcely room to turn himself, almost suffocated us. This produced copious perspirations, so that the air soon became unfit for respiration, from a variety of loathsome smells, and brought on a sickness among the slaves, of which many died. Many a time we were near suffocation from the want of fresh air, which we were often without for whole days together. This, and the stench of the necessary tubs, carried off many. Thomas Phillip, captain of the ship Hannibal, 1693 voyage. The negroes are so loath to leave their own country that they have often leaped out of the canoes, boat, and ship, into the sea, and kept under water till they were drowned, to avoid being taken up and slaved by our boats, which pursued them. We had about 12 negroes did wilfully drown themselves, and others starve themselves to death, for 'tis their belief that when they die they return home to their own country and friends again. When our slaves are aboard we shackle the men 2 and 2, while we lie in port and in sight of their own country, for 'tis when they attempt to make their escape and mutiny. When we come to the sea we let them all out of irons, they never then attempting to rebel, considering that should kill or master us, they could not tell how to manage the ship. No gold finders can endure so much noisome slavery as they do who carry negroes. We endure twice the misery, and yet by the slaves, mortality, dying, our voyages are ruined, and we pine and fret ourselves to death, to think that we should undergo so much misery and take so much pains to see so little profit. Surgeon's Mate, the Ruby, 1790. Testimony to Parliament. Not infrequently, after slaves were brought on board, they would refuse to eat, and the captain would order them flogged unmercifully until they obeyed. In fact, he usually plied the cat on the naked backs of the blacks, and seemed to find a pleasant sensation in the sight of blood and the sound of their moans. If the sea was rough, the slaves were unable to dance, and whenever it rained hard they were kept below, and the gratings were covered with tarpaulins, which made it very hot below, and nearly suffocated the slaves. Dysentery usually followed a spell of bad weather, and the mucus and filth among the slaves below the deck made the slave deck a horrible place. A ship doctor's account published in 1788. The men, on being brought aboard ship, are immediately fastened together, 2 and 2, by handcuffs on their wrists and by irons riveted on their legs. They are then sent down between the decks. They are frequently stowed so close as to admit of no other position than lying on their sides. Nor will the height between decks allow them to stand. The tubs, for bathroom purposes, are much too small for the purpose intended and usually are emptied but once every day. As the necessities of nature are not to be resisted, slaves who can't reach the tubs ease themselves as they lie. Exercise being considered necessary for the preservation of their health, they are sometimes obliged to dance when the weather will permit their coming on deck. If they go about it reluctantly or do not move with agility, they are flogged, a person standing by them all the time with a cat o' nine tails in his hand for that purpose. The fresh air being excluded, the negroes' rooms very soon grow intolerably hot. The confined air, rendered noxious by the effluvia exhaled from their bodies, and by being repeatedly breathed, soon produces fevers and fluxes which generally carry off great numbers of them. The floor of their rooms was so covered with the blood and mucus which had proceeded from them in consequence of the flux, that it resembled a slaughter-house. It is not in the power of the human imagination to picture a situation more dreadful or disgusting. Slave Trader, voyage of 1808. The day before we were to start, the branding was done, and a good deal of flogging had to be done also, to keep the frightened negroes quiet. Shakos Lash and the heavy whips of his assistant negroes were not idle for a moment. The slaves were fetched up singly, made to lie down on their faces, where they are held by a big negro, while another kept the branding irons hot in a fire close by, and a third applied them between the shoulders of the shrieking wretches.